You don't ask me any questions, I just talk? Okay, sounds good. So I've been asked to give my testimony of the events as they have unfolded. I have questions, but I also think I'll spitball a little bit. So I was raised as a Christian in a Christian household. My parents sort of fumbled around and then became Christians, and then I grew up going to church consistently. But I was sort of just annoyed with church people. People didn't like my mother. She was a little crazy, and they didn't like me because I was crazy. And I just felt very disconnected from church. My dad started working away from home a lot, and I got really depressed and angry around 13, and it climaxed with me just being like angry and suicidal. Because everything was meaningless, everything was stupid. Everybody that was around me was just very hypocritical, and I thought it was really lame. So that all climaxed at about the age of 13, and that is when I ended up giving my life to God. What made that happen was I had gone to church and had been around people at church for a long time. My sister was in the youth group, and I hung out with the older kids from time to time. And there were a few people in my life that actually seemed real. There was a couple named Val and Laura, and when I talk about them, I just say that they're like homeless for God. They just would go where God told them to go, interact with people who God told them to interact with, and they were real and genuine in that. And they genuinely served people and were beautiful people in that vein. And then there's a girl named Jessica Gilman who was in the youth group, and she was just on fire for God. She was really beautiful and gentle and kind and patient and just sort of devoured God. And I was really excited by her. But I saw those three, and I'm like, okay, they have something genuine. All these other people, I don't know why they're here, what they're doing with God, but they have something genuine. And so when I got to the point where I was just like, what is the point of living? I decided to give God a try before I killed myself, because, why not? Well, you can. That was around 13, and I have not said I'm 32 currently. But when that happened, okay, so I hit rock bottom. I decided to give God a chance. And then how did Christ affect my life? Let's see. I went from just sort of wandering aimlessly to having meaning and purpose and having direction. I still had no idea how to live that out. I had no idea how to do that holistically. The people around me didn't really have answers on how to do that holistically or answers for any of my bigger questions. And so I went through different phases. My worldview was very fractured. I was bringing my Bible to school every day and reading my Bible and being all about how to live for God. But then I also had major daddy issues, and I just wanted to be loved and liked, and so I ended up having problems with boys, and there was just lots of dynamics to it. But basically I didn't know how to live holistically in that. But let's see, what things changed when you became a believer. Yeah, like I said, at 13, it was partial. It was all the way through high school, even into my freshman year of college. I struggled with having a split worldview that I was operating in differently. But I earnestly, I wanted to be a missionary. I went to Bible college. In the back of my mind, I knew that this was what mattered, but I didn't know how to live it out practically. And so it wasn't until I was 19 when I dropped out of Bible college, because Bible college didn't make sense in its own way. The mechanisms seemed to triumph over relationship, and that didn't make sense in my brain. So I ended up dropping out. But then at that same time, God brought me to Aletheia, and I was like, oh, they're learning things at Aletheia that I learned in Bible college, but they're not just talking about it in a heady way, they're like living it out. And it's actually permeating throughout their lives. Like, this is interesting. So I joined up, and that was in 2009. I still had a very fractured worldview. I was in a lot of unhealthy relationships, but then like getting things together over the first year that I was here, honestly, like the first 6 months I was here, God really brought my life more together. Like I was like, oh, maybe God doesn't want me to be unhealthy and make these bad choices, or oh, let's change those things. And then I ended up getting into a relationship with Colin in the fall of that year that I first came here, and that changed my life drastically too. Later on, it talks about what relationship in your life has most impacted your relationship with God. My answer for that is Josh, Michaela, and Colin. But the aspect with Colin was I didn't have trust of care. I didn't have an understanding of what a healthy relationship was, he showed me basically a lot of godly love and fruit of the Spirit in our relationship. And so that changed my life drastically, and I don't know where I would be without that. When it comes to my development, it was sort of like a boost for my development at that time period. How would you describe your life now? So when it comes to life now, this is hard. Imagine where you would be without Christ. What would that look like? I always sort of joke in a inarticulate way that I would just be on drugs, probably be a whore, or be dead. Like those are my three options without God, because the way that my mind works, I can't just operate in the mundane. I can't just operate in the day-to-day. I would have asked too many questions, and I would have just been where I was, suicidal, or suppressing that knowledge with drugs, or looking for love in all the wrong places. So that's where I would be without Christ. But now, living out life is a lot more hope. Like just every day is hope-filled. Every day, every interaction, every thing that takes effort, every direction, like it all has a direction, and we're supposed to glorify God in it. We're supposed to do right by these things. We're supposed to produce the fruit of the Spirit. We're supposed to so the only word that came to mind was hopeful, hope-filled. What were your biggest struggles in the past being a believer? Honestly, I think it really came down to just not having a holistic example in my life. People like to keep things compartmentalized, things in the upper story or the lower story. And it was really hard for my brain to function in a world that operated that way. So that was a very big struggle. And or accountability. In the church at large, people don't know how to hold people accountable, and especially as culture has gone downhill more and more, holding people accountable is like non-existent, and that is what's helpful for my growth. So, especially as a Christian. So yeah, that is a struggle, and that's what I struggled with when I first became like a full-on Christian, trying to live for God. What about yourself did you struggle the most to give to Christ? My self-worth, I'm guessing. I'm also struggling with that right now, so that might just be in my brain, and just the general pattern of turning inward, I think. Because when you are focused on yourself or what you think you can do or what you think you're equipped for or what you think, just basically when you try to do things autonomously, like the world tells you you need to be doing, it just doesn't work with who God created us to be. And yeah, that's definitely something that I've struggled with in the past and continue to struggle with, but I am really thankful that God is in control and that there is hope, because it is not a losing struggle, it's a winning struggle. What has taken you the longest to change? Like I said, probably that, but that's like a general man heart thing. So I'm just taking an easy road out there, but that's probably that. What relationship in your life? So back to that. So I already said Colin, but Josh and Michaela. Josh has affected my life for his I want to say the way that he sees things, like, this very inarticulate. Basically, Josh and his ability to be a prophet and his ability to cut through the crap that the world tries to operate in and address those things. And as he has grown, because I've been around him for 10 plus years, and as he has grown and honed his skills, it just becomes more and more like helpful for all of the people around him, but also in my life and my brain, like as he's learning more and more with counseling and just leaning more on giving biblical answers and yeah, just really applicable and to the point way to apply to live life for God. So that's him. And then Michaela, it's that same sort of thing, but in that feminine side of like how to live out. Interesting. I think Michaela is a safe place to articulate what I'm going through, for her to like hold me accountable and like suggest direction. So that's like the positive side of it, because it says, is that negative or positive and why? Part of my thought process with how they have affected my life is a negative side, that like I have a hard time of trying to please people and to like letting my vision be clouded with doing right by people rather than God. And yeah, I've grown a lot over the last many years of like finding the balance there of taking like wise godly advice and applying it in life, but understanding that people are people and that like what does God want in this situation, not just the people that are advising me. But definitely I think those three have affected my life the most. I think we're at the last question, but that seems a little crazy the way that has all come out. Hopefully it makes sense. What is a piece of wisdom you would like to offer to new or young believers? Basically, just ask questions. There are probably things that you are seeing that are inconsistent, that don't make sense. Figure out how to ask questions, figure out how to articulate what you're seeing, and know that with God there are answers, and like your continual pushing will be met with continual like direction and hope in that. And especially as a new believer, it's sort of difficult because there's lots that you need to build for like the foundation of your understanding of who God is. Not only breaking down the foundation of the world that has attacked it, that has clouded your way of thinking and moving and operating, but as you build that foundation and as you keep asking those questions, you just grow more and more and more. And it's like sky's the limit. But the more you learn, the more it makes sense. Like, at the beginning, you're probably not thinking to dive into doctrine or, heady things. But like, once you dive into those and history and just all of it, it just makes more and more sense as the time goes on. But that is that. So, my name is Bethany Sakewitz. I am 32, and this is my testimony.